OpenAI has signed a $200 million contract to help the United States government. Can you guess which department? Well, we've been told for years now how billion-dollar companies like OpenAI will transform cancer treatment. So maybe it's the Department for Health. We've also been told how artificial intelligence will provide every child from every background their own private tutor. So perhaps it's the Department of Education. Which could it be? Of course. The first ever partnership OpenAI has made with government is with the US Department of Defense. Who could have guessed it? The contract will net OpenAI $200 million. The Pentagon describes the award as such. Under this award, the performer will develop prototype frontier AI capabilities to address critical national security challenges in both warfighting and enterprise domains. Warfighting. Now, there are a number of reasons why integrating military and AI technologies is a bad idea. How merging major AI companies with the military-industrial complex could go very wrong. I'll explain a number before, though. Let's go to one of the godfathers of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, describing one problem with autonomous lethal weapons.
The worst thing about them is big, powerful countries always have the ability to invade smaller, poorer countries. They're just more powerful. Mm-hmm. But if you do that using actual soldiers, you get bodies coming back in bags, and the relatives of the soldiers who were killed don't like it. So you get something like Vietnam. Mm-hmm. In the end, there's a lot of protest at home. If instead of bodies coming back in bags, it was dead robots, there'd be much less protest, and the military-industrial complex would like it much more, because robots are expensive. And suppose you had something that could get killed and was expensive to replace. That would be just great. Big countries can invade small countries much more easily because they don't have their soldiers being killed.
That was Geoffrey Hinton, a godfather of AI, won the Nobel Prize for developing this technology. He was speaking earlier this week, or at least that video from the Diary of a CEO podcast was released earlier this week. So before this link up with OpenAI, but I think that explains very well one reason why this would be a very bad idea. Because if you have AI bots fighting your wars, then there's no real cost. There's a financial cost, but that goes straight into the military-industrial complex, which they're very happy to do. But there is very little political cost because humans aren't coming home in body bags, robots are. Now, if you're thinking this happens already, because we already have drones, and unmanned drones make warfighting much less dangerous, that's partly true. They do make warfighting much less dangerous. I think the point is just that AI would put this on steroids. So, for example, with drones, one limitation of them is that there can be sort of jamming technologies to stop the connection between the driver of the drone and the drone itself. If you have an autonomous drone, then you don't need to be in contact with it because it chooses the person or the thing to target and then does it on its own. So you can see why that would be brilliant for the US to be able to cause considerable damage to a country without any of their servicemen being remotely involved at all. Now, of course, as we've discussed on this show, there are also some more speculative concerns when it comes to AI, and particularly when it comes to the integration of AI with military equipment. As we've talked about before, two of the three so-called godfathers of AI think there is a significant chance AI could become autonomous and turn against humanity. Now, one of them is Geoffrey Hinton. It sounds like sci-fi, but these are the people who understand the technology more than anyone else. And this is what they say they're really worried about. So one of them is Geoffrey Hinton. You saw him earlier. We've talked about his concerns about existential risk on the show before. One of the others is Yoshua Bengio. So Bengio, along with Hinton and Jan LeCun, won the 2018 Turing Prize for his role in the development of neural networks. So they're the three so-called godfathers of AI. Bengio is warning against the risks of AI takeover. So 3 weeks ago, he gave a TED talk on AI deceiving us and suggesting we slow down AI development. I recommend you go and watch that, just 15 minutes long. Very interesting. And the reason I'm showing you that, though, now is because Bengio's call for AI to be put or to slow it down was put to another tech leader who was at that TED conference. This is Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google. He doesn't think we should slow down AI development. He thinks we should just give it guardrails. Take a look.
There's a set of criteria that the industry believes are points where you want to metaphorically unplug it. One is where you get recursive self-improvement, which you can't control. Recursive self-improvement is where the computer is off learning and you don't know what it's learning. That can obviously lead to bad outcomes. Another one would be direct access to weapons. Another one would be that the computer systems decide to exfiltrate themselves, to reproduce themselves without our permission. So there's a set of such things. The problem with Yashua's speech with respect to such a brilliant person is stopping things in a globally competitive market doesn't really work. Instead of stopping agentic work, we need to find a way to establish the guardrails.
Now, I also recommend watching that full video of Eric Schmidt for a different reason to the one with Yoshua Bengio, because Yoshua Bengio I found very persuasive. Eric Schmidt I thought was completely terrifying, because he's basically saying we don't need to slow it down. We just need these guardrails. Everyone in the AI world agrees that these are the red lines. No one in the AI world has actually concretely said they wouldn't do recursive self-improvement. So OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepMind, none of them have said they wouldn't do that, right? And lots of them are saying that they think they're probably on the cusp of that. Computers trying to, or these models trying to exfiltrate themselves. Anthropic have just shown that one of their new models did try and do that, and they haven't stopped. They haven't pulled out the plug. And then when it comes to weapons, he's saying people realize that connecting them to weapons would also be a red line. If we were to begin doing that, then we should pull the plug. Well, as you can see, that's now happening, right? The idea that AI companies saw military uses as too dangerous to deploy in the military might once have made sense. So maybe Eric Schmidt is just out of date, because OpenAI did originally ban the use of its software for military purposes. And that's largely because lots of people in this world did recognize the huge existential risks of making a technology which could sort of speed out of our control and then giving it access to all of the drones. In January, though, OpenAI quietly dropped that ban, and presumably seeing there were billions of dollars to be made. Also, I think they're in a bit of an alliance with the American security establishment, because OpenAI say the reason you can't slow us down is because we need to beat China. And so there's just this really cozy relationship between OpenAI and the military-industrial complex in the United States, which I think is terrifying. Schmidt was also out of date when he gave that speech, because AI is already being given some autonomy when it comes to killing people. And this is a report from Deutsche Welle last month on autonomous drones in the Ukraine war.
AI is speeding up processes like the kill chain: locate, attack, evaluate. The Ukrainian army excels in using drone data for tactical decisions. Many of these processes are now automated. In fact, autonomous navigation is proving far more effective. When drones are flown by humans, hit rates are typically between 10 and 20%. But with drones powered by autonomous navigation, hit rates can jump to as high as 80%. Loitering munitions might take the form of kamikaze drones. They circle over an area for up to 9 hours. Sensors identify potential targets, comparing them to the targets they were trained on. In the event of a good match, the drone and its explosive charge descends, crashing straight into the target. Typically, soldiers will monitor the process, keeping a human in the loop. If in doubt, they can still abort.
So if in doubt, they can still abort. We'll see how long that lasts. As well, especially because, remember, as I said, one of the reasons why an AI drone is particularly valuable is because if you lose connection with it because of a system jammer, it can still get the job done. So there's a real incentive for the military to say to this AI, whether or not you lose contact with us, we want you to destroy this target. Right? So that is completely autonomous killing. Stephen Methven, welcome to the show. Sorry, it's been a while. These stories have taken quite a while. It's a very interesting show. But Stephen, are you as worried as me about the merger of these AI companies with the world's most advanced military?
Yeah, I'd say I'm super worried about it. I was thinking while you were doing that piece about being a kid and watching the film RoboCop for the first time. I was probably far too young to be watching it, but it opens with, I think in Detroit, they've got a kind of autonomous robot police officer who goes haywire and kills some civilians. And you know who's delighted by that is the competitor AI robot company, because the realization is that once these technologies are in the system of war or policing, they don't ever come out. They just need to get better or be improved. There's room for competition. And improvement in this case means improved killing machines. One of the things that I think of as the most disturbing aspect of modern warfare, and it's an aspect that this will only add to, is the remoteness of killing in modern war. So I think you put it in terms of it being less dangerous to go to war, but you sort of think that going to war should be kind of dangerous. There should be a sort of repellent force that means that it's a really big decision to make, not just because you're going to potentially lose some of your soldiers, but because you're asking human beings to kill other human beings. And the gamification of contemporary war, the remoteness, the fact that you can kill people from a faraway control center without having to actually witness or feel what it's like to kill them, taking on no moral hazard yourself as a soldier, I think is a very dangerous direction and disturbing direction that war has gone in. And of course, autonomous AI, would only make that worse, because it wouldn't even be clear, who would be responsible were it to go wrong, were civilians to be killed, were the wrong targets to be hit. So yeah, I find that pretty disturbing. I mean, it's also the case that it's not very clear that the use of AI. I mean, I think one of the arguments will be made is that AI warfare or AI-led warfare or AI-led weapons will be more precise, will have less room for error. But we know from AI that's already being used in war, like in Gaza, for example, that there are thresholds that are still set by human beings. So you have more accurate killing, but you can set the threshold such that you actually don't mind if a number of wrong people get killed. So, for example, lavender in Gaza, which is used by Israel to identify targets, has apparently a 10% error rate. That's according to Israeli magazine 972. And also the soldiers or the Israeli military was allowed to set the threshold to a relatively high degree when it came to the killing of civilians. I mean, obviously that we know serves Israel's grander purpose in Gaza. But that's a human decision, which is, when you set the threshold higher, you're therefore guaranteeing, when it's AI, which is maybe more accurate, the deaths of more civilians. And then there was another very disturbing sort of piece of AI used in Gaza called Where's Daddy? And again, what it did was it identified targets, and then it tracked them to their familial homes before those homes were bombed. So in other words, guaranteeing, in most cases, not just the killing of a target, but the killing of whole families. So yeah, those are very scary applications of AI in ways that have allowed a genocide to occur. And one of the reasons that a genocide has been allowed to occur is because there aren't soldiers who are in the same way actively involved in it. There would be much more, I think, resistance from soldiers, from reservists to it, if it was the case that there was actually confrontation between individuals and the actual human pulling of a trigger in many cases. So the removal of this kind of moral hazard that soldiers ought to really take on when they engage in warfare, just for me means that warfare will become more brutal. Not a good turn of events, I don't think.
Not a good turn of events. I suppose, hearing how the IDF sort of speak about Palestinians, I think they probably would manage to do it without it being automated. I totally agree with you, though, that it does make it much easier. I would much prefer a person to have to make that decision and to face the real consequence. People say it with meat eating, don't they? That sort of, if you had to kill the cow or the sheep yourself, you might just go for the vegetarian option. And I think you can have a similar argument about warfighting, which is if you don't have to do the killing yourself, you don't face the same moral quandary which could stop you doing it in the first place. As for the sort of outcomes that people think are more sci-fi, because they are more sci-fi, I still just think, there's 3 godfathers of AI. Jan LeCun says he doesn't think we should worry about them taking control. 2 of them, Yoshua Bengio and Geoffrey Hinton, do. So that's 2 out of 3. That doesn't make me really confident that they are going to take control, right? What it does, though, is make me very reluctant to dismiss those concerns, right? If you've got 2 of the 3 godfathers of the technology saying this could end the world, I find the impulse to dismiss that concern strange, which is why I keep banging on about it.